all to our fourth event in the Graduate Institute's summer series, The Phenomena of Modern Life and the Future of Liberal Education. I'd like to begin by especially welcoming the second week of Summer Academy students to the college. It's wonderful to have you here, and I'm happy to have you at this lecture. As your tutors and others have told you, the lecture is a part of college life, and typically on Friday evening, and they can tell you more about it, but it's a wonderful way to learn from members of the community and members from the wider Republic of Letters. It's a special honor for me to introduce tonight's lecturer, Mr. Dan Harrell, tutor at the college. I can't really say just how much I've learned from Mr. Harrell over the course of the decade plus that I've been here, so it would take up too much time. It's just sort of singular intellect, and I'm truly honored that he decided to give a lecture in this series, and I'm deeply honored to welcome him to the podium to lecture on our problem with the problem of technology. Dan Harrell.
About 3 years ago, there was a faculty meeting at St. John's where we discussed the increasing use among students of audiobooks to prepare for class. How worried should we be about it? And should we have a policy on it? The argument for worry and for a policy seemed to me simple enough. At St. John's, we read books for ourselves, while audiobooks are read by someone else. Students should never confuse the two, and a policy against the audiobook would insist on the distinction. But there was nothing so simple about the issue in our discussion, or firm in our resolution. True, there were worries expressed, especially from newer tutors, more in touch with the freshmen. The main worry, as I understood it, was that reading had become a form of consumption for students who relied on audiobooks, which they mistook for a form of learning. The remark of one tutor especially struck me. "Think of two students," he said, "one of whom has struggled to get to the end of the reading on their own power, and another who has simply pressed play." Other tutors, older tutors, were less confident about the issue. The main rejoinder, as I understood it, was that listening at the college is as important as reading, and both pose the same challenge: to understand what is meant, whether the words are written or spoken. Perhaps the audiobook helps some students listen better. By the end of the discussion, there was no stomach on the faculty for a policy. As one tutor put it, "I would not want to legislate the issue for students." Our collective sense was that tutors could make up their own minds in their own classes about what it would be best to do. But leaving the problem of technology at the level of ambivalence, in my experience, was already a habit on the faculty. 10 years prior, we had a faculty meeting to devise a policy on e-readers in the classroom, only to see our resolution dissolve in discussion. There was a similar scratching of heads, as I recall, at the prospect of a wireless network on campus, which was about to be installed, but with the power, if we wanted, to be turned off in classrooms. Perhaps at first it was turned off, before it became too convenient, or should I say necessary, to be left off. Our cell phones, too, were to stay off in the classroom until someone realized that one phone, at least, would need to stay on in case we got a campus alert. I was in a classroom one day where all our phones went off, suddenly, with a weather alert. It turned out to be a tornado warning. And the tornado did get as close to the college as West Street. I also recall the day inside a classroom when I said to myself, "Finally, we have wireless." and I experienced my own form of ambivalence about the audiobook. Our discussion of it drove me to my desk, or rather, I confess, to my computer, to write a lecture defending the book as something to be read rather than heard. But once I was done with the writing, what a book is had become puzzling to me, and its difference from an audiobook all but forgotten. It had faded from my mind the more I thought and wrote. That lecture is not this lecture. In this one, I want to keep the audiobook in my sights and think more about what I just called ambivalence. My ambivalence, our ambivalence, about such things as audiobooks, e-readers, wireless networks, along with computers and smartphones and Zoom, or in a word, technology. Though this word too prompts our ambivalence. What does it really mean? And how worried about what it means should we really be? And suppose the word technology does mean enough to deserve our concern. Is the concern with something old or something new? Are we facing a perennial challenge in technology or a pressing threat? Ambivalence at St. John's is habitual and even principled. It is better to think, after all, than to react, and this makes us at once ready to raise questions, yet reluctant to reach answers. But what if technology were something that makes questions a luxury and answers a necessity? What if answers for technology have to precede our questions about it, if our questions are to have the stakes and the space to be genuinely asked? Our ambivalence in that case might do us more harm than good. It is from this worry, a worry I hope to clarify over the course of this lecture, that I want to think more about this ambivalence when it comes to technology. Or as I put it in the title, our problem with the problem of technology. Part one, there are 3 parts. What is the problem of technology? Well, you could go read Heidegger to find out. His question concerning technology is now canonical on the subject. There have also been books on it, many books, written over the last 100 years, like Lewis Mumford's Technics and Civilization, or Jacques Ellul's The Technological Society, or Albert Borgmann's Technology and the Character of Contemporary Life, or Anton Barbacay's A Web of Our Own Making. Every such text treats technology as if it were something real and something new, even if rooted in something old, a phenomenon of modern life, perhaps the phenomenon of modern life, and a threat to human existence despite all its benefits. Hence the problem of technology. In Annapolis, however, we read no such text, while Santa Fe seems to have settled only lately on the Heidegger, amounting to one night on technology across the campuses. Why is the problem of technology barely at the margins of our texts? One reason, surely, is that the topic makes a book topical, timely without being timeless. And we want timelessness first from our books. Timeless books, so we think, can become all the more timely in the inferences that we can draw from them with our own sense of moment and relevance. But there is a cost to this, I think, when it comes to the problem of technology. For if we try to infer this problem from a timeless text, we risk making the problem unreal. Let me give 2 examples of what I mean. In my junior seminar last year, when we got to Gulliver's Travels, my seminar partner, Miss Burns, drew students' attention to one page with a picture. This was Gulliver's sketch of an invention he saw at the Academy of Legato to generate words mechanically. This device, its inventor hoped, would allow anyone to write any book on any subject they pleased, without any need for knowledge or wisdom or skill or inspiration. Miss Burns asked the students what this invention really was. After a puzzled silence, she exclaimed in a tone of triumph, "The computer." What to think of this moment? At first, it can seem like proof of how timely our timeless text can be. On second thought, the implication can sound absurd. After all, the computer was not invented in Gulliver's Travels at the Academy of Legato. It was invented in texts by Boole and Frege and Turing in the realm of mathematical logic. Without these texts, and the answers given in these texts, the question, what is a computer, could not really be asked, much less answered prophetically through the fancy of Jonathan Swift. We take the computer seriously by taking it to be something actual, not notional or fictional. In this respect, no Gulliver's Travels, which is to say none of the timeless text we read, can explain the computer or its consequence in our lives. It is not merely a prospect that might be ridiculed, but a fact to be addressed that we find ourselves facing a screen when writing a paper or this lecture, along with all the other things we nowadays do are even addicted to doing in front of a screen. We can even remain screened when reading Gulliver's Travels and then having a conversation about it, as if we were still ourselves when flattened into pixels. Which brings me to my second example. For while we can read Swift to deride this, we have read another author, an ancient author, to defend it. This happened when we decided to go online for classes during COVID. Some tutors commended this decision for how it made us like the Athenians, taking to their ships during the Persian invasion. What should we think of this comparison? At first, it can seem proof of how timely even Herodotus can be. But in one possible sense, on second thought, are Athenians taking to their ships they built and could sail with skill, like students and tutors, especially the tutors, fumbling their way onto Zoom. Fumbling is part of the problem. And when we invoke Herodotus to make it look resourceful, the problem again risks becoming unreal. But pledging ourselves to the timeless in texts is just one reason we keep the problem of technology at the margins. It cannot be the only reason if we think about everything we study at the college. For what if it were not just technology, but laboratory science that we left to illusions in Swift's Academy or the thinkery in Aristophanes, or in a more serious vein, the glimpses we get of Lydgate's research in Middlemarch? Our understanding of laboratory science would be impoverished. So we dedicate whole rooms to the endeavor. We even put a symbol for laboratory science, the balance, at the center of our college seal, surrounded by 7 books representing the traditional 7 liberal arts. And with the balance, we make room for the new. Bacon's new organon, Galileo's 2 new sciences, even the one new science that Vico hoped to establish in response and defense of studies humane. Perhaps these texts are old enough now to be timeless. This seemed to be Scott Buchanan's view, for one. But there is no escaping the way they take themselves to be new or modern when it comes to science. And modern science at St. John's is real enough and important enough to make our text timely from the start. In the GI history tutorial, we read texts by Heidegger and Husserl that mention modern science by name, while the last reading of laboratory in the undergraduate program is a lecture given in 2004 by Walter J. Gehring, a Swiss developmental biologist, entitled New Perspectives on Eye Development and the Evolution of Eyes and Photoreceptors. Here are some lines from that lecture. Quote, "The fact that small eye, aniridia, and iris are mutations in homologous genes suggested to me that PAX6 might be a master control gene specifying eye development in both vertebrates and insects. To test this hypothesis, I decided to construct a PAX6 gain-of-function mutation to express PAX6 ectopically in an attempt to induce ectopic eye structures," end quote. Having stood the test of time is clearly not the reason we read this text rather than one on technology. Yet the text we read is steeped in technology. Its conclusions about the eye could only be reached with cutting-edge techniques in genetic manipulation. It conducts its research in ways that Middlemarch's Lydgate could scarcely imagine, and that our own laboratory could only replicate, really, by dedicating us to its research, leaving liberal education behind. The text we read, in other words, poses the problem of technology implicitly. But we read it not for this, but for its conclusions about the eye. And in reading it for these results of research, with a more or less blank acceptance of its means, we risk making the problem of technology invisible, or again, unreal. It is true, as many of you know, that we do manage to replicate experiments from texts we read in quantum mechanics during the first semester of senior lab. We have managed this by building a quantum lab in the basement of Mellon. And there is a cost to making it work every year, not just in money, but in the time and skill, along with the accumulated experience and finesse of a dedicated lab director, plus several highly motivated faculty in Annapolis with backgrounds in science. There is no escaping technology in this endeavor. It is as real and demanding as can be. But the cost of this demand is beyond what we could expect in principle of students and tutors at the college, and Santa Fe has yet to replicate it. Perhaps we have already left liberal education behind in making the Annapolis Quantum Lab a success. In that case, our very success can make us mistake it for a triumph of liberal education. And we once again risk making the problem of technology unreal. Part 2. But what again is the problem of technology? And don't tell me to go read Heidegger. For the rest of this lecture, then, I will describe it like this. The problem of technology is the problem of concealment. We can see ancient roots of this problem in the inventiveness of the Greeks, which are often linked to acts of concealment. Think of the Trojan horse, or the character of Odysseus more generally, or again, the Athenians leaving their city to Persia while sneaking away on their ships. But for a modern example, consider the telescope. Invented in the lifetime of Galileo, he applied it to astronomy and improved it several times over in its power of magnification. Not that we need to know what he did inside the casing to enjoy or profit from the result, but there is a deeper sense in which we can never know what Galileo did, even if we peer inside the casing at the lenses. For looking there is no longer to look through the telescope at the stars. If any improvement to our sight is to remain an experience of sight, it seems the improvement has to be concealed. This concealment, at any rate, is the effect of every advance in automation, miniaturization, computation, digitalization. All these advances conspire to reduce the use of our inventions by design to the touch of a button. Pressing play is not just a feature of audiobooks. It is a mode of everyday life. We can do more and more, knowing less and less. Hence the progress of technology, but also the problem of technology. For technology makes the world it improves for us more opaque to us, as if being inhabitable were at odds with being intelligible. These odds make technology a problem in particular for education, especially liberal education. For it too might be said to improve the world for us, to make it more inhabitable, but this is by making it more intelligible. And finally, significant. The world gains breadth, depth, and perhaps something transcendent, even sacred, beyond the horizon. Or so we hope, we students of liberal education. But what then should we do about the problem of technology? What should we do, that is, not in our choice of texts, but in our choice of practices and policies? For in light of a world made intelligible through liberal education and the world we hope to inhabit, technology can start to look like an intruder, even a polluter, littering black boxes across the landscape. We can also dispense with any high-flown rhetoric to describe the threats. Consider the audiobook again. The issue over it could be put like this. There is one way to possess a book, to have it read, by having to read it for ourselves. And in doing this for ourselves, we do it freely. We so possess the book, we might say, through liberal art, the art we gain in learning to read and practice with every book we read. Technology, however, makes another way of possessing the book possible. Thanks to the audiobook, we can have the book read without having to read it for ourselves, or even having to know how to read. Learning to read becomes unnecessary, and to that extent, liberal arts becomes unnecessary. This may seem to exaggerate the effect of audiobooks on liberal education. For one thing, recalling our faculty discussion, it ignores the way that listening is a liberal art and how we might learn to listen better through the audiobook. For another thing, again recalling that discussion, we might discourage its use case by case, with all the strength implied by a policy, yet with the wisdom to allow for exceptions. But now consider the newest way of pressing play. Asking a question, any question, of ChatGPT. This invention gives us a way of having the question answered without having to answer it for ourselves. What becomes unnecessary in this case is something like learning as such. And it seems no accident that the word learning is used to explain how ChatGPT can answer the question. It promises to do our learning for us in the same way the audiobook can do our reading for us. This effect, too, may seem exaggerated. How could anyone, most of all anyone at a place like St. John's, let their learning be done by AI, or even think that learning is what AI has shown when it answers, quote unquote, our questions? Yet even at a place like St. John's, students are tempted enough by AI-generated text to warrant a policy. When a paper is due tomorrow, even Johnnies can want the writing done without having to do it for themselves. Yet writing, perhaps even more than reading, would seem to be a liberal art, something we can only do for ourselves, especially if we put our name on it. So what should we do with a form of technology that can write for us in our name? The most direct answer, I think, is to banish it as an instrument of plagiarism. The policy would be simple enough to state: use of ChatGPT and other AI technology to draft any part of a paper is plagiarism. This technology may not be used, even with citation. But this, it turns out, is not our policy. I just quoted the policy at Thomas Aquinas College. The St. John's policy is more of a mouthful. Quote, students should avoid including passages that have been composed, translated, or substantially revised by computer programs, e.g., by generative artificial intelligence platforms or comparable tools, including such passages without both the appropriate tutor's advance permission and full citation constitutes plagiarism, whether or not the original text is preserved in any other document or other location. What to make of this mouthful? Evidently, we see enough danger in AI-generated writing to discourage it, but not enough danger to prohibit it. We even trust ourselves enough to allow it if the use is permitted by the tutor and flagged by the student. When policies are required and discussion has ceased, it seems we still cannot help but be ambivalent about the problem of technology. Yet the ambivalence is peculiar in making us generous with technology itself while remaining aloof to any study of it. We have even become dependent on technology itself, abandoning campus mail for electronic, our college catalog for a website, and making the network behind these moves as important to the college as heated buildings or running water. Why have we adopted it without first having any account of it? Why not forbid the use of technology until we find the reasons for embracing it? I may have already answered this question. There is a trust we place in ourselves, or really a trust we place in liberal education. And in the same way it asks us to learn for ourselves, it asks us to decide for ourselves. And a prohibition would take the decision out of our hands. Policy, in this respect, can be no less a threat than technology to our autonomy, and banishment is another form of concealment. Perhaps it is possible to justify prohibitions in liberal education, the same way a school like Thomas Aquinas justifies an allegiance to scriptural authority. But going without such authority as we do at St. John's, argues for having as few prohibitions as possible to allow the widest berth for what we do to be done for ourselves. In this respect, technology is not a threat to liberal education, but an opportunity to choose education and strengthen it in the resolve. There will also be times, and for St. John's, the closing of campuses because of COVID was one of them, when choosing education can make technology a necessity. The trust in liberal education at these moments is that it puts us in the best position to use technology wisely and well. And consider less extraordinary moments, even at this lecture, where my voice is being amplified in the room and broadcast through video outside the Great Hall. This, too, involves a trust in liberal education, a trust I share as a willing participant. And every time I find another forgotten gem in the St. John's digital archives, my trust, I feel, is rewarded. Part 3. But what if this trust in ourselves is misplaced? What if we have betrayed liberal education for technology? Consider this example for a start. In 2022, on a page of our website about the Friday night lecture in Annapolis, the Annapolis dean was quoted, and this is what he said. Quote, "While classes at St. John's generally proceed through discussion among students, the lectures provide an opportunity for students, faculty, and members of the community to hear an extended argument from someone with greater learning and expertise. The question period is an essential part of the event, where conversations can open up between the entire community." End quote. On a separate page about the Friday night lecture in Santa Fe, the Santa Fe dean was quoted, and this is what he said, quote, "While classes at St. John's generally proceed through discussion among students, the lectures provide an opportunity for students, faculty, and members of the community to hear an extended argument from someone with greater learning and expertise. The question period is an essential part of the event where conversation can open up between the entire community." End quote. Evidently, even deans at St. John's can want their writing done without having to do it for themselves. The presidents, too, for they were also quoted in different words from the deans, but the same between themselves. In fact, the text of each page was identical. The only change was to names, where these differed between the campuses. My best guess, discounting miracles, is that both pages were produced from a single template, allowing the deans and presidents, busy as they are, to approve their quoted text without having to write it, and in this case, forgoing any revisions to it. In one sense, this raises the same question we asked of AI-generated text. What should we do with a form of technology that can write for us in our name? But in another sense, the question is answered before it is asked. For in this case, we are the form of technology, and to question it is to question ourselves. Here is a second example to consider. Does St. John's College have any majors for undergraduates? The answer is no. But suppose you ask ChatGPT the question, and the answer you get is this: St. John's College has one interdisciplinary major in the liberal arts, an interdisciplinary major for an interdisciplinary world. Intrigued by the mistake, and perhaps unsettled by the flourish of the tagline, You then ask ChatGPT to say more about the major. It replies with this: St. John's all-required curriculum prepares students for a world in which adaptability and change will be central to both personal and professional well-being. You might think it got confused with all its data, conflating a major at other schools with the all-required curriculum at this one. But I quoted these answers, you might have guessed, from what we say at the moment on our website. The conflation is deliberate, even cunning. If ChatGPT had pulled it off, we could ask what we should do with a form of technology that can even speak for us in our name. But the technology, again, belongs to us and our own way of concealing the truth in a linguistic invention. To question it is, again, to question ourselves. Perhaps we are not to be trusted when it comes to technology. One book on technology that I mentioned before, Jacques Ellul's The Technological Society, would warn us that the real danger of technology comes not from without, but from within. It is not, at bottom, the kind of thing that comes knocking on the door. It is the kind of thing that gets in the walls. In light of this danger, Ellul preferred to the word technology the word technique. Technique is the form technology takes on the inside, even if it looks like a device on the outside. The problem of technology in this inward sense, I would say, is the problem of concealment when it becomes absolute. And this, I think, has become the real problem for education, especially liberal education. When concealment there becomes absolute, the danger is that a distrust of education, a denial of education, a betrayal of education is hiding behind the name of education. For a first example, consider the wording of one standard that St. John's has to meet to remain an accredited institution of higher education. Quote, design and delivery of the student learning experience, end quote. The echo of technology in these words is unmistakable, yet they are meant to formulate a standard of excellence in education. I leave it for you to judge whether the formulation reflects any belief in education. We can also see such a form of technology inside St. John's, from which I have already drawn two examples of concealment. Words that no one said, put in the mouths of our presidents and deans at a school with no majors, claiming it has one. But it is worth a more general look at our website and what it meant, as I mentioned before, to let it replace our college catalog. The catalog, to begin with that, was in the hands of the faculty and modeled on a book with a table of contents and even an index in its heyday. There was the usual information found in catalogs for students and parents, such as the layout of campus, clubs and extracurriculars, fees and financial aid. But there was also a lengthy statement of the program, a bibliography of articles on the program, a history of the college, and list upon list of names in the back, all the tutors, all the students, all the members on the board of visitors and governors, all the principal officers, even all the alumni representatives. The catalog, in short, was of the whole, written for readers interested in the college who on their own time, in their own way, could learn just about everything they might want to know. It was also published every 2 years, which not only kept it up to date, but allowed readers to compare different editions to see what had changed. The college was not just whole in the catalog, it left a history. We gave all this up when we put ourselves on a website. And there, the college resembles nothing so much as a labyrinth. When the website is updated on no stated cycle, the previous version vanishes. There is also no beginning or end to the pages, no order from one to the next, connected as they are through hyperlinks. Each page itself is no longer contained on the screen, as it was in the early days of HTML design. The page has to be scrolled. And in the scrolling, one's attention is meant to be attracted rather than respected. There is no chance of turning the visitor into a reader. It is too easy to lose one's way and too hard to make a way of one's own. This is why our website is not in the hands of faculty, but instead overseen by communications, another word with overtones of technology and a branch of the college that did not exist before the internet. And the work of communications, to borrow its own language for it, is in creative strategy. Writing to be read is the least of it. Yet here, then, is a concealment close to absolute. For the purpose of the strategy is to attract students to a great books college, where writing to be read is the most of it. This is also the contradiction that landed us on a website. For at some fateful point, we stopped trusting in our books and a catalog modeled on the books to secure our future with the books. But the website is just one form of technology inside the college, and there is another form that encompasses it. Its name is administration, and it divides our whole in half, taking one half to itself while leaving the other half to instruction, or what it seems we now call academics. But the real effect of administration has been to make the actual college a labyrinth. Things are still clear in the classroom, and it is worth a moment to appreciate this clarity by way of contrast. The numbers of tutors and students at the college are in roughly fixed ratio to one another, without any further distinction in rank. And the work they do together is settled by an academic calendar, a schedule of classes, and in the one thing we saved from the catalog, a statement of the program. The work in these ways is a matter of common understanding. True, there are 3 tutors at the college in positions involving matters of confidence: the dean, the assistant dean, and the associate dean. But even in these positions, as much is made a matter of common understanding as possible, from their number and their name, to their length of term, to their scope of responsibilities. And as all this is true on one campus, so it is true on the other. But now to the administration, where nothing is so clear, even at the top. We once had one president and no vice president, then a president and vice president for each campus. These days, to oversee the same 2 campuses, we have 3 presidents and 7 vice presidents. The 3 presidents, it is true, are only 2 people, but this caveat is another sign of the complexity. Some of these positions are campus-specific, others are college-wide. Some of the college-wide positions reside on one campus, while others reside on the other. And there is no statement, nor calendar, nor schedule to make the work of administration a matter of common understanding. Nonetheless, what can be written down is the structure. And this used to be our way, like our way with the college catalog, to guard against opacity. In what we called the polity, we put the governance of the college into words and would abide by the words until we were ready, again in writing, to amend them. When we wanted a vice president on both campuses, we wrote this: there shall be a vice president of St. John's College in Annapolis and a vice president of St. John's College in Santa Fe. We still have a polity in name, but we no longer write like this. The sentence about the vice presidents is now this: there shall be vice presidents and other officials as necessary. The phrase "as necessary" contains the problem of technology as technique in a nutshell, for it gives administration the means to meet exigencies more or less immediately, as if with the touch of a button. Hence our 7 vice presidents of the moment, with nothing in writing to resolve upon it. As if to underline this triumph over the written word, the faculty learned just last week that our board now wants to cut much of the text from the polity in one fell swoop in order, so they say, to streamline the document. A verb, streamline, borrowed from aeronautics to suggest that the words we write have no weight. Indifference to the written word could not be clearer, even when concealed behind a concern for it. Perhaps we are not to be trusted when it comes to liberal education. And I just have a brief conclusion. I have been at the college now for 25 years, and so far as the classroom goes, I have seen nothing change. The conversations we have at the table about the books, so far as I can tell, are the same as ever and as good as ever. But what I worry has changed is the bearing of these conversations on anything outside the classroom. I used to see what I valued most about St. John's radiating outwards. Now it feels like it's drawing inwards. And here I am, helping the college I love contract. Once a class is over, I usually check my phone, just like most of the students in the room. We are no less lost at those moments than anyone else at the college, and no less to blame for a whole divided in half. This is really the reason I worry about our problem with the problem of technology. If St. John's only has to be on its guard, I guess it's fine to be ambivalent. But what if St. John's has been captured by technology? The question then, it seems to me, is not what we might do or not do to keep the college safe. It is what we must do to take the college back. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Harrell. We'll take a brief break, and then I welcome the community into the room over here, whose number I don't know, for the question period, which, as we know, is an important part of